Hey everybody, let's do a little studio tour today of some of my favorite paintings, and I'll give you an update. Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Bruce with the Bowski Studio. Thanks for joining me today. If you're new watching for the first time, my channel's about everything to do with painting, oil painting, and I do some case scene work also as little studies. So if you're new, thanks for joining me. I just wanted to give everybody an update. Of course, I haven't forgotten about my channel, but with everything going on in the world right now with this coronavirus, there's a lot to be thinking about and concerned with. And for me personally, what's new with me at the household here is that my mother-in-law, who lives with us, she's 91. She, during the, when this started getting ramped up in March, she fell after dinner. I was upstairs and my wife was in another room, but she fell and broke her hip, and is doing fine now. She's been in a rehab nursing home facility, and for probably 3 weeks now, 2.5 weeks. We'll be picking her up next week, thank God. I was getting a little nervous because on the news you hear about a lot of nursing home issues in, I think it's New Jersey, Connecticut, maybe there's one other one, and I was getting really concerned about that. So my mind for focus on painting has just not been there for many weeks. And during this time I also lost my employment where I work. Management and I had some disagreements on what I felt they were doing for the employees and leadership, that sort of things. So I'm in the boat with everyone else out there in the world. Not everybody, but a lot of people unemployed. So got to be working on that and hope I land on my feet. But today I did want to segue into getting back into painting. And what I do sometimes, I've done it in the past, it doesn't happen often, but if I'm feeling a little down or if feeling like I haven't painted in a while, what I do is I look at older work, and especially paintings that I like that I still have, and it really inspires me. It's like, oh, I can do this, let's get back to the easel. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go over some, I'm going to break this out. I might do a couple videos. I don't want to intermix too many things, but we're going to start with landscapes and go over some of my favorites that I've done and talk about them a little bit, and hope you enjoy it. And for the new people watching and clicking on my channel for the first time, if you like what you see today, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification. It'll let you know when I post new videos. And I think there's a way you can pick all my posts, or you know, there might be choices you can make when you make your notification. You'll have to check that out. But let's get rolling. Also, what I want to go over for a few minutes at the end of the looking at the landscapes is to go over my wall easel. I've showed it a little bit before, but I've made some more improvements, and I think it might be useful for your own studio space. So we'll get to that at the end. Stay tuned. Okay, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about some of my landscapes that I really like, that personally pretty proud of, and for different reasons, and we'll talk about those reasons as we go over each one. There's going to be 5, and I'll probably do further episodes of this, little collections. This particular collection is very leaning towards I wouldn't say very abstracted, a little more abstracted for me than I normally do. It might be a little tighter, so it'll be interesting talking about those aspects of the paintings, and I'll try to give you some close-up shots and far away normal shots so you can see the brushwork and texture and all that sort of thing. So let's get started. Okay, this first one here is called a Birch in the Woods, and it's going to be one of 3 that I'll be showing today that I painted at the local woods that is owned by a local college, Colby College. Always like walking around in there. They have this nice creek that runs through there, and I was kind of near that creek when I painted this on site, and I just love how these birch tree roots just kind of dance all around on the forest floor, and it really adds a nice with the paint, which I'll zoom in here in a minute. I tried to really kind of get some scumbling going on, a little dry on wet, and I did a little bit of layers when I brought it home from the plein air session, and I just really like how that tree stood out in the forest. And the palette was I typically use a split complements. Typically I'm using this particular one. I don't think has no, it doesn't have the palette on there. Sometimes I do write that on the back of the painting, but commonly in the past I've used titanium white, ultramarine blue, cobalt, a warm and a cool yellow, and cadmium yellows, and then alizarin crimson, cad red, and sometimes I'll have black on the palette. But it was really nice and moody. The sun wasn't super strong, of course, because you don't see any shafts of sunlight, and I kind of like that idea of letting the colors of the woods be saturated. Now I'm going to zoom in here to show you some close-up details. So you can see how some of the dry, scumbled paint really adds to the interest of this type of environment. There's not a lot of smooth surfaces because you have a lot of dead wood that falls in forests in general, and it's really nice to be able to use the brushwork. Try to zoom in slowly, very carefully. A lot of just suggestive marks with the brush, especially down below here with the leaves on the forest floor. Hardly anything there. Very abstract when you zoom in, but when you pan away, it all comes together. So let's move on to the next one. Now this one is called By the Creek. Again, it was painted in Colby Woods, and this time you had a little sunlight, dappled sunlight coming through the forest, and it added a nice element. And here I am by the creek. I'm actually standing forward. This was painted on site also, plein air. And the creek has it's very shallow, and the distance across is not very far, and there's a lot of rocks to walk on, little tiny islands to stand on, and that's how I got the view that you're looking at. I really love how I handled the rocks in this one, and the subtle shafts of sunlight, I didn't want to make them too strong, and to me they would seem too false. And then I try to accent a little bit of the cooler colors, really play those up a lot in the shadows, because I wanted to have a complement to the orangey tones of the forest floor and the sunlight. And I think overall it's a pretty nice little painting. I especially love how I handled the root system here on the tree. I think that came out really well. And I like this little pop of lighter tone of this really dead tree with all the bark missing. I think that adds a nice touch to make the painting pop a little bit. So, whoops. Very, very happy with it. Now let's zoom in. I'll show you a few details of this one. So here's a little close-up of how I handled all the parts with the scumbling of paint. Just dragging the wet paint over some lighter tones. Sometimes that might have, of course, part of that might have been done plein air on site, because the thinner layers in the beginning, then when I dragged the thicker layers, and then as this dried in the studio, I went in and enhanced the shadows, and adds a nice nice activity to the scene. That's what I like about it. And the composition, like I mentioned, I really like. I really enjoy this painting a lot, and not much I would change too much. There's just this tree shadow coming across here, and then this part of the shadow would have had to offset just a bit, but overall happy with it. So as you can see so far, really what I've been doing, you would think a lot of times when you're out painting in the forest, it can look very chaotic and very hard to decipher how you might want to paint the landscape. But I've really tried to simplify and abstract out certain parts, and really only try to focus on elements I wanted the viewer to really put their mind to and look at, the tree trunks and that white log in the foreground, and everything else kind of just drifts away because it's just a very suggestive use of brushwork. So I implore you to try if you want to paint in the forest and you've never done it before, start on some small panels. These are 6x8 paintings, and that really allows you to get some practice in and give you some ideas on a smaller scale of how you might control your brushwork to achieve the suggestion of detail in a scene. So let's get back to another painting. Now this one is called Sun Dappled Woods, and I painted this also plein air at a location just one town over. There's a nice hiking trail that actually connects to another area over by the Colby College campus, and I had to walk down incline to get to this spot. I've actually been here before just to hang out with my tarp and hammock, and it's right by the water, right by the Messalonsky stream, and it's a very peaceful place. And these trees are right along the shore. The what do you call it? The stream is right over here on the left, so I'm right on the water. Very nice, relaxing. I cooked a little lunch, did the painting, and it was a very pleasing afternoon. I think this is one of my most successful abstracted landscapes, if you will. Far away here, you can see it really has the appearance of dappled light coming through the tree canopy and that sort of leaf canopy, and it's so suggestive, and I was really happy with how I achieved that. I kind of just went for it, didn't think too much. Very little I did when I brought it home and it dried. I enhanced the stump a little bit, but not too much on this one. It's pretty much completed practically on site. And when we zoom in here, you'll see there's areas that is literally the base tone from when I blocked in the masses in the very beginning. And a lot of that was left. So let's zoom in on that. So forgive me for a little bit of shakiness here. I got it zoomed in. But you can see in these little areas in between the trees, just the base tone of some umber. Probably use some umber or sienna. Then we have the stump over here. Let me get a real close-up on this. I'm going to take it off the easel and just hold it in front of the camera and move it around. I just really try to go slowly so you can really see what I'm talking about. Very pleased, especially over here. You see a lot of suggestive sort of thing. You really need very little. It really doesn't take a whole lot to get a look of something, and I really want to try to push that in some of my urban paintings to, you know, your inclinations, put in a lot of windows and this and that, and trying to be more suggestive. But the landscapes really help working in that genre. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with this one a lot. Not too much. Again, I like the composition lead in with this little log here, fallen timber kind of thing. Now these were all painted probably within a month. There might even be some that were, you know, the two on the ends might have been painted within 2 weeks of each other. But overall, the collection works nicely together, especially with my floater frames I hand make. And pretty happy with how everything kind of relates with this suggestive brushwork. So now let's move on to another one. Also, what's nice about working small like the little 6x8s, never mind the fact that you get to do a little more on site at that given time because you're working in a small format. You can move around, or if the light changes a little bit, or if it took you a little bit to get in on a hike, that's another advantage of working small. Your kit can be very petite. You don't need a big palette to mix paint and that sort of idea because you might be, say, walking in for a period of time in a situation and you got your small kit with your small panels. You can also have room then to pack a lunch, or in inclement weather, if you're way out in the woods and all of a sudden you get a little rain shower, you can take a small tarp or do a little bushcrafting a little bit and be prepared and maybe just hang out for a bit while you're painting So, something to think about. Okay, this one is called Stream Reflections. It's also 6 by 8, and I painted this from a photo. And what's interesting, once we zoom in again, this probably, there's not many overstrokes over the base tone of the tree line, and it really, to me, is very effective. It started out as a oil and paper, and I had it laying around the studio for actually quite a long time, I think a couple of years, and I just always liked the little bit of stream here with the little islands giving some interest to, rather than just have it all be water, and then the light hitting the tree trunks on those nice kind of late afternoon winter days. I really enjoy that kind of light, and I was really trying to be suggestive. And at the time I started it, I was like, I really like the bones, but I don't know, I'm just not super happy with it. Well, then I dug it out a little bit ago, probably a year ago, maybe a year and a half, and fixed it, did little reflections, heightened up some of the light on the tree trunks, and I just think it's a really interesting painting now. I really like its very abstract qualities to the paint handling. And this was, like I said, actually on paper. And what I did once I decided, hey, I like this painting, I'm going to, save it, I mounted it with some acid-free mounting adhesive to a panel, one of my 6x8 panels, and that allowed me to attach it into the frame. And then I also varnished it on top of that. But let's zoom in on this, and you'll see some of the nice, interesting layering. I'm not sure how good the camera, if I slow down so you can tell and see the detail. Really happy with how I achieved some of the effect without putting in a lot of detail. And it doesn't mean that detail's bad or anything. Don't get me wrong. It can be useful. The problem is some people get so caught up in analyzing every little detail they see. So what you want to try to do is paint the effect. You don't need a lot of detail. It's really interesting how little you can get away with. You want to try to create the feeling of what you saw as you were driving your car and went, oh, look at the light on the trees. And then that's what you focus on while you're painting. Everything else becomes a supporting actor. Even though you see the detail, you need to play it down. And you can see the overall effect is it's a believable scene. So something to, for me personally, to try to aspire more to. So pretty happy with this little painting. So I hope everyone's enjoying this little show and tell. I just really wanted to try to explain why I might have painted a scene, and I think it's important for artists to talk to other artists about parts of their painting, the painting process like I'm doing today. And I hope you find it useful. Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see more of this, I do plan on doing another segment of some landscapes and then getting into some urban, and then maybe a couple still lifes we'll see in the future. Let me know your opinion. Let's get to the last painting. Okay, this one's called Meandering Stream, and this is probably the one that I altered the most and kind of created elements in it to be believable. So it's quite a challenge doing that when you didn't really have any reference. I tried to use bits and pieces of other landscape snow paintings I have, photographs, but overall I feel it came out pretty good. I really like how the stream meanders back in the background, of course. And the impasto on it is quite nice. I really enjoyed doing that. And if I remember correctly, I used some cold wax on that. And that material, if you've never tried it, is very good. I've done some videos on that. You can check those out. And I really like the sense of light. Having most of everything in shadow really intrigued me. It's almost like 2/3 in shadow, so I like that effect a lot. It was literally just a corner of my eye. I caught a few things. And then when I came home and tried to work from photo, the foreground, which is so boring, so I really had to artistically enhance it. I do really love how I handled the trees up in here. Once we zoom in, you can see what I did there, but very enjoyable. I like the textural aspect of the paint. So let's zoom in on that and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to try to hold the camera very steady and get in there so you can see that texture. And I'm going to have to pause every now and then, let the camera catch up. But I love how I handled the tree edges. Very important to try to not have strong lines, especially in this time of year, of course. In the summer, you're going to have easier time probably of creating some edges, but I love how I handled this. Really enjoyed that. I tried to pan down here. I love this little bit of reflection from that tree. And I also like how I handled all this little scrubby type of stuff that you find along these type of streams. Just very, very suggestive. Nothing really over blended too much. Really put some paint on that log right there. And I like how I have variety within the shadow rather than just smoothed out with one tone, because in snow you do have undulating landscape under that snow. So yeah, one of my favorites for sure. A lot of things I learned and a lot of things I'm proud of. Okay, now I'm just going to do a few minutes of some updates I did on my wall easel. And some people might have seen this before. I showed a little bit of it. Basically a 2x4 construction. Nothing fancy. Created some uprights. And they are tacked down to the floor with screws at an angle. A couple screws. That has some cords wrapped around it because I have a power source here to plug things in and charge up tablets, that sort of deal. And then of course it's right up against the angle of the ceiling, and you can see how I ran a 2x4 and then the front part of the easel is screwed to that. And then I faced it with 1/4-inch MDF boards, painted with chalkboard paint, keep it matte. And of course that will get dirty over time with paint. You can always just apply more coats or wipe off the paint when you get paint on there. But the improvements are, I took this metal strapping that you get at Home Depot, has holes in it. It's sold where they sell aluminum angle iron kind of stuff. And 4 straps. The initial idea being to have magnetic. These are some retail magnets you might see like at signs at like Walmart or Staples. Whoops, sorry, my level fell off that I have taped on there. Very magnetic, very strong. I also was originally using the magnesium magnets, and I was just having a little tough time finding the right adhesive. I tried super glue and stuff, and sometimes they pop out, so I just screw these on. And now, because this is metal, it goes anywhere. And that is the support for a panel. And the top of the panel would be held by the same idea of magnets. And they're very strong, so you'd have to push down quite a bit to have that collapse on you. And I'm also going to be trying, I haven't yet, but I have magnets on the back of this plastic clipboard case I bought at Staples. Inserted some plexiglass adhesive, sprayed that on there, and we'll see how that does for having the paint right next to where you're painting and see what happens. Normally I have my palette right here with my terps and all that good stuff. So, oh, and I also, on this side, that's where I'll hold my tablet. Same idea with the magnets. And this I found at Goodwill. It's just a tablet holder. You might find them for SUVs and that sort of thing. Works great, right adjacent to where I paint, in case I want to work from photos. So yeah, pretty cool. Okay everybody, this concludes this little show and tell video. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have any other ideas that you'd like to see for studio sort of visits, if you will. And again, if you're new, if you were watching for the first time, be sure to subscribe. I'd love to have you on board with everyone else. And until the next video, take care.